Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. It's Sunday again. I already got some folks coming in. That's always great to see. Good morning, Cody. Good morning, Christopher from the Hill. Logan. You have so many names. Uh, so hopefully the volume's coming through all right. And there's Bear the Gen X GM, and RW Bishop. I know that Jason from Mecha Studios is on his way in as well and may actually be coming on with me today. And
Always,
here,
always, man. If there's an invite to come, I'm there. Plus,
well,
I'm doing formatting on a document, so I'm like literally bored out of my mind.
that happens. Yeah. Let's see. Full Metal Dragon, welcome. Mage's Musings, cool. If I sound a little weird and spacey, it's because I am ill slept and underhydrated. I dehydrated the crap out of myself yesterday, which did not make for a great night of sleep.
How did you do that?
Too much coffee and other caffeines.
There's no such thing as too much coffee. I don't know what crazy talk you're talking, but
Well, let me rephrase that then. My coffee to actual hydration balance was way off.
you put water in coffee, right? Like I'm just going to go out on a limb on that
Well,
one.
that's true, but the net effect is
I'm
that
messing
it
with
all flies right through you. Yes, I know you're
Yeah,
messing with me because that's what you
caffeine's a
do, dude.
diuretic. That's my thing. Kind of my thing.
Trust me, my wife spent almost 20 years as a massage therapist. I have had a water Nazi on my back forever.
Wow, water Nazis. Now I've got something new to create for the Zenith universe.
But no, she is very much all about the water. And rightfully so. I mean, her whole job was muscles. So
And not
muscles
the
and
selfish.
tissues. Nope. She had a reputation. Many of her clients had joked that she should get jackhammers tattooed on her elbows.
Wow.
Because she did deep tissue therapeutic stuff, and
Yeah.
I've seen her do stuff that is Indiana Jones-esque. I've seen her reach up under somebody's rib cage to massage the tissue under the cage or in through their armpit. Kalima. Yeah, but yeah. So I mean, she got medically retired from that when her arms blew out. So it sucked.
That sucks.
When you develop holes in your ligaments. Anyways, we're here to talk about mecha games and mecha RPGs specifically, not necessarily war games or anything like that. And also kind of to touch on why it is that, at least in my opinion, they never really took off. Or if they have taken off, they've been short-lived. And some of the problems with getting them to land. I'm not experienced in every mecha game out there, but I have played a good number and I've read through a good number. Also, your mileage may vary. And, my experience is my experience. But also going to put out the caveat that, yes, any game you're playing benefits from greater buy-in and a player base that is that understands the nuance of your game that you're playing. But there are certain things in certain genres and genre-specific games where that is absolutely paramount for the enjoyment. In my opinion, of course. Let's see. Mechhead Studios snuck in here. So, hey, Jason, how's it going? Hungar the Starvarian, good day to you, sir. I saw you were playing Conan Exiles the other day. If my current machine would handle it, I would have jumped on with you. But, yeah, I'm on a machine with too little RAM, which really sucks because in a cabinet over there, I have all the RAM I need. It just doesn't fit in my new machine. Different connector. I'm like, because my old machine died, and my brother was kind enough to give me his gaming machine that he no longer uses because he's a dad and has no time. But the memory didn't fit. Here's Jason. Let me bring him on. Hello, sir. Good morning. I see you're in your garage. For those of you who have heard me talk about it, garage. You're in Texas in your garage. That's right. I can see you got your door open even.
Yeah.
But this is Jason, the Jason from Mecha Studios. He is a miniature painter, a gunplug guy, prop builder, world building GM. He is many hats, and also like a super dad. So bonus points for that. So, all right, and R.W. Bishop, unfamiliar with Battletech. Let's see.
Has Dale created a new name for himself? Is that what's going on with R.W. Bishop? Is that just Dale pretending to be someone else so he can just poke at us through the chat?
He's been here forever. He comes in from Geek Streams, but yeah, I wouldn't know Dale from anyone. He's one of your people.
One of my people. Oh, Jesus.
Is he one of you Canadians?
No, he's Texan.
Oh, well, then he's down there with Jason.
He's one of the many Texans
because everybody in
that are trying to
Texas
convince me to
knows each
move to
other, right?
Texas.
Because Texas
Well,
is
just
small.
like in Canada. Just
It's
like in
tiny.
Canada,
Texas
we all
is,
know
you
each
know,
other.
it's just a little small town, the entire place, right? You know, what the fuck do I know? I'm here in Missouri.
Missouri.
Yeah. All right. So, got 7 people watching. Let's get this thing going. So, mecha games, they come, they go. They're really, I mean, people who play Mecha RPGs are, I think, gravitate towards them because they're looking for that experience of a favorite anime or anime in general, right? The problem is that once they get in and start playing it, they don't get it. They don't have that experience, and there's a lot that goes into that. If you are familiar with anime, and I'm going to say it the way that I learned it, which is anime. That's how we said it back in the 80s, because if that's how the Japanese say it. On the West Coast, close to the place where it comes from. That's how I learned it. Pinky up. But anyways,
Classy.
just going to say it because somebody's going to come screeching out, it's anime, like my kids, because they grew up calling it anime, and I'd be like, no, it's anime. So we'd get in those fights. Anyways, what a lot of folks don't realize when they're coming into a mecha game, a mecha RPG, is that most successful and enjoyable mecha anime series are only about 50%, maybe even less, giant stompy robots. And most of the time, it's all interpersonal stuff between characters. And while some role players are into that and good at that, there's a vast chunk of gamers who just can't interface on that level. You know, the thing that makes those animes, those mecha shows great when you're watching them and getting into them is all of that. And so when you sit down at the table and the other 50% of the equation is missing, I think it leaves people feeling a little meh. And then they sort of just they get frustrated, and it just doesn't sit well. They may keep playing it because, you know, giant stompy robots is fun and enjoyable in its own right, but at a certain point you're not so much role playing anymore and just playing a glorified war game. For the most part, you know, if your only role playing decisions are, I'm going to flank the Zentradi and, you know, and shoot him in the back, you're wargaming. You're just not doing it at a map with miniatures or chits or whatever you have. So that is kind of my take on why they kind of come and go, and why everybody is eternally seeking to rewrite the mecha game, even though we've never really, I don't think, had a big one that has come and then blown up. Part of that's also because that genre has died out over the years too. You look at the stuff that's coming up on the streaming services, or even the stuff that's being produced in Japan, the number of mecha anime that have come out is greatly reduced from what it would have been back in the 80s. And almost nowadays, if it's not Gundam, it's not happening, or at least it's not making it here. So, but yeah, it's kind of the baseline that I'm going with here. Pacific Rim. Pacific Rim is based on that, inspired by, but I think Pacific Rim, in a lot of ways, as good as it is, suffers from kind of a Battletechism, where Battletech starts with being inspired by the nifty, cool, giant, stompy robots of Japan, but then it filters it through so many bits of Westernisms that it becomes something else. Even though it's still good and enjoyable, it is not what it set out to be in the first place. I mean, Battletech, first of all, the entire presentation of how combat in Battletech works, despite where their designs came from, actually comes from Dougram. There's one specific anime that their style of combat models, and that's the Dougram series, where like 50% of their mecha came from. So, anyways, I'm going to stop the preamble, and I'm going to let you guys talk. Jason, you came in with thoughts today, and Bear, you always have thoughts. So I'm going to let Jason go first.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah, you're coming through fine.
Okay. So, yeah, I had two trains of thoughts on it. One, when it comes to the gaming aspect of it, especially role-playing games, what doesn't really translate well, and a lot of people don't get, is, excuse me, when you're watching a series like Gundam, for instance, when you're role-playing, you want to have these superheroic characters that are, above everything else. Everybody wants to be the new type, like a Moro or Char, for example.
Yeah.
But in game, you obviously want longevity with your character and your mech. Unfortunately, Gundam, even with a GM or your regular Zaku, they get one-shotted, like, easily.
Oh, yeah, and characters of substance die in those series.
Exactly. So translating it to a game, it's kind of hard to do, because if you have those that want to keep it real with the series, but if that were the case, you'd be going through mechs left and right all the time and making new characters literally every game. Because, like I said, you get the beam saber, one shot, boom, your mech is destroyed, your GM is destroyed. And we're not even talking about the UC, not UC, I'm sorry, like Gundam Wing or Iron Blooded Orphans. We're just talking about UC.
Yeah, the Universal Sensory stuff, the main canon of Gundam, yeah.
Right. Regular baseline troops can just get one shot by each other. Literally, you can watch it in any one of the episodes.
And even if we step outside of Gundam, you see it in Macross. Valkyries are dying in the background left and right. So it's not just Gundam.
Yeah, no, but that's just the more accessible one that a lot of people know of.
It's a good baseline. It's usually the baseline I operate from.
Right.
So continue.
Oh, well, so what had me up all night was when I saw that you were going to make this stream. So back in the late 90s, I'm going to age myself, even though you can tell by the gray. We are a council of graybeards, apparently.
You're in good company, sir.
Yeah. So back in the day, Palladium Book was pretty much the baseline for all mecha gaming because they had the Robotech license, right? There was Mechton Zeta, Mechton 2 out at the time, Bubblegum Crisis. But
They didn't have the name recognition, though. They were generic.
Right. They were generic. But yeah, Robotech had everybody's interest. So back then, again, this is late 90s, early 2000s. My oldest son was maybe 2 years old at the time, or a year old, something like that. A couple friends and I were on the Palladium Books chat boards, right? And, we're discussing, hey, we should make a Gundam RPG, blah, 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 and so on. And what happened was Marianne Ciambita, Kevin Ciambita, who's the owner of Palladium Books, this was prior to their divorce, happened to pop in. So, we had a little impromptu discussion, and we are talking about, yeah, we'd like to do this, this, that, these type of games. Why can't Palladium do them? Oh, it's licensing. She was being very polite, very informative. And then she let out a little secret that most of us did not know. And excuse me, sorry, it's just super hot in here. So anyway, she told us, well, and this is before OGL. This is before Wizards of the Coast got 3rd edition out. She said, well, we have what did she call it? It wasn't open source. It was a fair use license. And we're like, what's a fair use license? So she gave us a link on the Palladium site. This is when they were starting the Rifter and everything. Fair use license was, as long as you put in this block of text on your main page on your website, you can make an RPG about anything you wanted using the Palladium system, which was great for Gundam. I had a friend who was doing Gundam. I wanted to do Transformers.
Yeah, there were a good number of pages that were statting out various mobile suits for Gundam.
Right. So we looked at it, and the basic rule was, as long as you had this block of text that basically just consisted of, they own this copyright, this is their trademark, so on and so forth, you can use their system to make any RPG you wanted, as long as you did not publish their rules verbatim, which was the key word, but you can make new skills and whatnot. So of course I had a friend named Ash who did Gundam Wing, and was kind of hidden because we all used it on GeoCities, if you all remember that.
Right? Yes, the olden days.
Yeah. So he had Gundam Wing. I started what was called Super Deformed Gundam Emporium, right? Making stats for super deformed, chibi Gundams.
Yeah.
The cute little ones. Because me and my kids, we've got like 400 of them. Like literally, we've been collecting them since the 90s.
The Funko Pops before they were Funko Pops.
Right. And then I also made the Transformers Universe RPG. So what was funny was we started doing this, and then we got with, and I'm sure you remember him, Dave Dietrich, who made Macross Mecha Designs.
Yeah, like the guy who did the illustrations, yeah.
Yeah. So we got with him because he had that nice web layout, and the Palladium web ring was, really starting up at that time. So we got with him, got permission. Hey, can we use your web layout so that way we can make our site so everything looks, consistent? Yeah, cool. I don't care. That's cool. So we did that, and then to cover our butts, every entry we had on there, be it, like I said, my Transformers universe, Optimus Prime, Jazz, Megatron, you had that little text block underneath it saying, copyright, blah, 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 Palladium Books, Mega Damage, SDCs, Rifts, so on and so forth. So about 3 months later, we've got these sites. The Palladium web ring went from like 20 pages or 20 members in the link to over 300. I had another friend that made Record of Lodos War, another one that did a Votoms. It got Kevin Ciampita's notice. He was pissed, as everybody knows he gets pissed over stuff.
Kevin Ciampita being pissy
I
about something?
know. It's amazing.
Sure, that's not some weird alternate universe because he's such a nice man. No.
Exactly.
I will not be party to the smearing of this good man's name, sir.
Oh, I'm not smearing it. I'm just, letting the facts.
He's an asshole. I'm sorry. I'll say it. I'll smear it. The guy's an asshole.
Yeah, I mean, he is so possessive that when I first saw Savage Worlds Rifts come out, I'm like, does Kevin know about this?
Yeah, same.
He's somebody else playing in his sandbox, I mean, like, no.
Yeah, but he ended up reaching out to a bunch of us. Not reaching out, trying to force his way in there. He got pissed because a lot of us that played Macross, that were playing Robotech, let's put it like that, Robotech, we're working with Macross. He was pissed because we were correcting everything that Robotech got wrong.
Yeah, because you were bringing it in line with Macross instead of the Frankenstein's monster instead of the Frankenstein's monster. Right. That's Robotech, yeah. I mean,
he's like, he went so far as to say, where are you getting this information from?
The perfect manual, the liner notes for the model,
liner notes from the model, the Bibles, even the Harmony Gold release, the perfect Bibles that Harmony Gold released, those 3 volumes.
Oh yeah, was it the Robotech art and all of that? Yeah,
right. did all that, and we got all this stuff. Protoculture Addicts, if you remember that magazine.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff, and he was pissed because people were liking the stuff we were putting out more than what was in Robotech and correcting it and playing it in his online chat rooms on the board. And yeah, you can't do that. I'm like, well, no, sir. Mrs. Ciambita pointed us to this web link saying that we can, that you published, and it's also in your first issue of the Rifter. So what are you gonna do now? You couldn't do shit about it.
Yeah,
But
it's
subsequently,
fan content, so he really can't do anything about it. Period. I mean, it's
yeah, but that's why my Robotech book got denied when I submitted it. But shortly thereafter, they lost the license.
yeah. Well, it's. I will say I very much enjoyed Palladium's Robotech and played the crap out of it. We played our own side stories. We played it, out into the future of the timeline. We did a lot with it. And when Sentinels came out and kind of expanded that universe, while Sentinels was maybe a little weird at times, it still gave you a idea of where Robotech could go.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, Sentinels turns Robotech into Star Trek, sort of in a way. Like, we're going to boldly go and find new species and then ultimately fight the Invid again. But but yeah, I was a Mechton guy. I came into Mecha. I've been into Mecha games through Mechton back when it was the first edition book with the very Shogun Warrior looking, mech on the cover. Picked it up at a comic shop, and then from there just kind of followed the game through every iteration after that. Mechton Empire, Road Strikers, and then when they came out with the Mechton construction system, and then Zeta. It was always a good system, but that one really requires your GM to do a lot of front work, because if you're not using one of their existing source books with all the mecha done, you are making a shit ton of mecha up front, unless you're playing like the Algol kind of campaign where everybody just kind of makes whatever they want. But anyways, I mean, it doesn't help that what we've had have been very tightly controlled through Robotech, with Palladium. But Bear, what do you have to say? Oh, actually, first of all, Jason, were you done?
I'll jump in whenever.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's how we roll here. If you have something to say, just say. I just wanted to get opening comments out of the way from both of you. Bear.
Hi. I'm not sure what my opening comment should be. I guess establish my boundaries. I'm a super robo, not a real robo kind of guy. I prefer Grendizer and Mazinger, well, Goldarak, as I know it because of the French translation.
Yeah.
I prefer that kind of stuff. So when you get later in the teeth, you start to get stuff like Godaner, which just amuses me right down to my toes because it's just exactly what I want.
I love Super Robot also.
Well, Super Robot lends itself much more to role playing than Real Robot. And the problem is no one really has done an excellent Super Robot game other than first edition Mechton. First edition, the book, not the box, but the book, the first book of Mechton, you could do great Super Robo stuff with that. But as we went along, we saw Battletech was the 800-pound gorilla in the mecha role-playing world. Heavy Gear came out from DreamPod 9, Montreal company. They were Ionis, I think, at the time. No, they converted to being DreamPod 9. Clearly, the engineers took over the subgenre because it was all about how can I stat out and build my mech to the nth degree. And for me, that does not. Sorry?
Go ahead. Continue. But I was just going to say that's a point I wanted to make later on. Go ahead.
Okay. And for me, that is antithesis to role playing, because that's the miniature gaming aspect coming in, where I'm going to build the ultimate beast mecha and have a great time. So we tried playing Battletech without a map, and it was tedious. We tried playing Heavy Gear, and I didn't enjoy it. And I just wanted a really good Super Robo game. That's all I really wanted. And then I discovered the greatest Super Robo game that no one knew existed.
Marvel Superheroes, obviously.
You can use this game to make a Super Robo game and have a grand old time and never have to put a map down and just play and have fun.
Oh, yeah.
Because everything is covered. everything is covered, and you don't have to worry about point builds, and you don't have to worry about, how many heat sinks do I have, or what my SDC versus MDC versus whatever is. And so for me, that's way more interesting. I am not a Real Robot fan. I've tried watching Gundam many times, and I get so bloody bored by that show. It hurts how much I hate that show. Not hate, but dislike intently that show.
You bounce off of it. That's yeah.
It doesn't connect for me. In fact, the more I think about it, there isn't a single anime of Real Robot that connects for me. Whereas the Super Robot stuff, I can lose myself in it for hours.
Yeah.
The last one being SSSS Gridman, the anime, not the live action show, but the anime they made out of the live action show, that just pickled me tink, man. I love that thing from top to bottom, because for me, Pacific Rim is exactly what I want. Mecha versus kaiju, super robot versus super monster.
Yeah, and that is definitely a better way to or an easier access to role playing, because honestly, it's just superhero role playing.
Yeah,
with a different super suit.
And shouting out your attacks. Oh my God, yes.
You can do that as a superhero too. You could be like, I remember playing Champions with a guy whose character had on all of his power builds, he had to have be able to vocalize his attacks. You had the limitations. Does not work if cannot speak. Or something kind of thing, like, because he had to call out his attack. So all game he's like, super punch, lightning attack. And it was great.
Thunder Vortex ass smash.
But yeah, and the technical aspects that you're talking about there, where the engineers kind of came in, and I feel is what often leaves the mecha games falling short, not feeling like anime mecha games. You're playing a mecha game, but you're playing a mecha game. And I've even seen it go so far, for example, like with Jovian Chronicles, which was INS DreamPod's first foray, because before they had Heavy Gear, they made a Mechton campaign, series of Mechton campaign source books using the Mechton system, which was Jovian Chronicles.
Yeah.
Brilliant books. I love the art in there. Nice pencil and watercolor art, as opposed to the very linear, like tech spec that everything is in their newer products. But you get to their current Jovian Chronicles, which is played more as a battle game, a miniature battle game, and the mecha disappear into the background. Their mecha in that game are almost treated just like fighter squadrons in any other fleet game. You've got ships out there and you've got mecha out there, but they get so down and dirty on the specifics. And this is a weird kind of dichotomy, because mecha fans love reading notes about the power output of the generator and the thrusters and the kilowatts power of this beam gun versus that beam gun. It's all over the documentation for all of their gunpla and all of their books and everything. But I don't think they want to play that. And a lot of the games bog down in that. They're like, okay, here's how much fuel you have. Here's your ammo count for this. And that never really, I won't say it never plays out. It doesn't play out in a linear, trackable fashion in the shows. Ammo runs out when it's important to the story. Fuel runs out when it's important to the story. Because you'll watch them run out of fuel after just watching them the episode before, burning way more fuel than they ever did in this next episode, just by their maneuvers and their thrusting and stuff. It's the story that takes point in mecha shows, and that is what I think gets lost in the games a lot. Real quick here, I'm going to backtrack through some of the comments. Full Metal Dragon. I keep wanting to say Full Metal Alchemist because, of course, anime. But one big giant stompy robots that somehow also has a setting to roleplay in, and that's true. It's kind of what we're talking about. One of the reasons I brought this this topic to bear is that not to bear, but to bear, but is that there's always been that disconnect, and even when it's course corrected, because what is that one that we were talking about recently, Jason? The name escapes me. It's the one that's built on a Powered by the Apocalypse system.
Mecha versus Kaiju?
No,
No, they're using Fate for that, I think, for the new edition.
It's just a particular game. It's God, what is it called?
We talked about so many games.
It was the most recent mecha game we talked about. But anyways, there's this game that came out and it's built on a Powered by the Apocalypse engine. No, it's actually built on the Blades in the Dark engine. That's what it is.
Not Beam Sabers.
Yeah, it is Beam Saber.
Yes, Bazookas and Beam Sabers, I think.
No, it's just called Beam Saber.
Beam Saber, yes, Beam Saber.
So that has its heart in the right place, but it gets lost in the weeds. It is so about the character and the story that it forgets the mecha part. I mean, the mecha is in there, but the mecha are just bleh. There's like nothing. Right. And then they have written every crazy anime construct into this mecha game to where it loses itself. It's just lost in the weeds. Like, why is there a vampire character for a mecha pilot archetype? Like, that's a thing that they have in their published works. And I'm not saying that they're bad people or that their game sucks. I'm just saying, like, you kind of, to me, they sort of lost the script there. It's like, mecha. If you're writing a generic game, which they did, that's cool. But I think a lot of their concepts for characters and characterization are outside of the mecha universe and more all-encompassing anime type concepts. Like, I guess if you wanted to tell that story where Lum from Mute Side Sura decides to come in her giant stompy war machine, then maybe you could do it. But, yeah.
I worked for a Project A-ko game. I don't know.
Well, Project A-ko as a show had all of that, though.
Yeah.
If your show is that, then there you go.
Oh no, it would work for Icer. What the hell is it? Ixer 1. Yeah, that would work for that.
Yeah.
The mecha shit was secondary by a big way in that. One.
And that I think that's the one thing to remember with most mecha shows is ultimately the mecha is second to the story and the characters. Except for in Super Robot, where
it's all about the goddamn Super Robot.
And that may be why you bounce off of Real Robot stuff. And if folks don't know, because I'm noticing a lot of people in the comments are not familiar with mecha stuff, there are two major categories of mecha shows. There is the original mecha stuff, which was Super Robot, which is your Guy King, Mazinger, Transor Z, if you're an American person, Western, audiences.
Goldarak if you're French, Gold Drake if you're Italian, Grendizer if you're
Pacific
Japanese.
Rim falls into that. That is it's your superheroic, really crazy, goofy.
What's his name? The guy that designed a lot of that stuff, Tetsu. Oh Jesus, hang on.
Jason, do you know? You're more of a Real Robot guy.
Tetsuo, I can't remember his last name or first name.
Yeah. Go Nagai. That's who I was thinking of. Go Nagai.
Yeah.
It's a lot of Go Nagai stuff.
Go Nagai, the guy who sounds like he should be a super robot. His name sounds like the name of a super robot.
Go Nagai sounds like a fucking anime show by itself. Like, just let's play Go Nagai.
Only a few years old. A few years back old when I found out that Go Nagai was not a super robot
or a company.
Exactly. I'm like, that's his name. But the other side of the coin for those who are in the audience is the Real Robot, which was sort of that was what Gundam introduced. If you know the name Gundam was the pioneer for Real Robot, which was, I can't remember the original creator of Gundam's name either.
Yoshiyuki Tomino, I believe.
Yeah, Tomino. Yeah, Tomino comes in and says, I want to portray robots not as superheroes, but as weapons of war, as machines, like a tank, like a jet, something real.
Super Robot was dying at the time was the problem, right? It had so saturated the market by that point that it was just people weren't watching it anymore. And then when you look at the original first Gundam series, it failed miserably until they did the short movies that then brought the attention back and suddenly everybody wanted to see it again. But the show failed. But if you look at the original first generation Gundam designs, you see a lot of that super robot still in them.
And it's even still there in the movies. But although it was going to be even worse. If you look at the original pre-production designs for Gundam, he was going to look like one of those battery-operated walking and sparking robots that was all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
He was also a lot smaller. Gundam he was originally like Super Something Soldier Gundam, whatever. He had a long ass name, and one of those heroic style names. But yeah, so that's the two delineations of Mecha, and then of course, you also,
and they're not hard fast delineations either.
No, not at all.
There are tons of series that are super robot told in a real robot style. There are real robot shows told in a super robot style. They mix and match wherever they can, but everyone likes to put things into boxes. So those are your two primary.
Yeah, I think one example that comes to my mind that kind of touches on it is Evangelion. Is almost super robot, but also real robot.
Yes.
And then there's the other one. Was it Code Gnosis? Yeah, Code Geass or Geass or whatever. Yeah, they sort of, in that they blend some of that, because some of the enemy robots are a little wonky, crazy, super robot-y. But yeah,
even the original Lion Voltron, the Japanese
Go Lion.
Go Lion was very super robot meets real robot, in that we're combining into a robot, but we're all very sort of like a thing.
Or the one that's 15 vehicles,
which is not Voltron at all, which is not related to the original Go Lion. But
I still find it funny that I just recently learned the story of how we even got the lions.
Oh, really? That they picked the wrong anime? That's my favorite story about that.
That is, that's the one. Basically, he's like, he couldn't remember the name of it. He's like, the lion one. And they sent him the newest lion one they had made, not the lion one he had seen and wanted.
No, because the one he had wanted was God. Is it King King of the Braves? Gaio
Gaigar.
Yes, the super robot with a giant lion on his check.
Yeah, Gaio Gaigar. Yeah.
But instead, they sent him their latest underperforming property,
which he turned into something fantastic. To be honest. And I think that's something that people would resonate really well to, is a RPG in that Voltron Lion Force style. I think that could really get people where they need to go, Oh,
the other thing I learned too about the background of that is that my new home state of Missouri, the whole thing, if you like Voltron in America, you can thank a broadcaster out of St. Louis.
Yes.
Yep. It was a St. Louis guy who brought it all over. He was a visionary. No, that's a different show. But
visionaries. Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's see. What do we got comments wise here? Oh, go ahead if you have something to say. I was just
going to say, I just think that there's look, this is going to be a bit of a hot take. Not that I'm not famous for doing those at this point in my existence.
They spark discussion, so by all means.
I think there's a bit of a snobbery amongst the mecha community, especially the Battletech heads. There's a real snobbery about what they think is appropriate, what they don't think is appropriate, and what they're, man, seeing you smoke is killing me. I want a cigarette so badly every time I see someone smoke.
Sorry, I can only smoke in the garage.
No, dude, smoke till your lungs leave. I do not care. I'm just commenting on every time I see you smoke. I'm like, I want a cigarette.
Yeah, don't do it.
It gets me through.
Cody.
Cody's funny when he wants to be, and a good hobbit. I just find
sounds like Alan Alda. I caught that when I was watching his Hobbit voice was very Alan Alda-ish.
Wow. War is hell. Anyway, I just really, and I used to find this back in the day as well, is that I just wish people would be less snotty about their hobbies and about their sub cliques within the hobbies.
That's just everywhere too, and it bugs me. Just love what you love and let other people love what they love, and don't get all RW Bishop, yes. In even in some of the real robot stuff, like the exam system and all of that stuff in Gundam,
Yeah.
like they have robot. I mean, there's even an instance in Gundam where a new type pilot's consciousness gets embedded in one of the machines, like pulled into the machine. Because that's the other thing. Gundam has a weird esoteric angle to it that a lot of people, even the Gundam fans, kind of bounce off sometimes. It's like new type magic. There's too much new type magic in this series, and so going back to the snobbery. I mean, even myself, I'm guilty. Like I tend to not enjoy the non-UC Century Gundam stuff as much, but I don't go out there, they're crap. I just have my reasons for not liking them, and but even some of the UC stuff, just like I can't stand F91. The stuff in F91 is like, what were you high when you decided to make a giant motorcycle battleship?
Some of the shit they do is you just go, Japan, responsible for 90% of the world's weird shit since 1950. Like
Mobile Suit Gundam back in the 80s, if somebody threw a giant motorcycle battleship into a real robot show, and I'm coming at it late like I did, I would, it was the 80s. It was the early 80s. They didn't know better. But by the time F91 comes out, it's like what? Almost it's the 90s. Thus the F91, wasn't it? It was like, didn't F91 come in at the they'd had a decade with that property, and somebody didn't think that putting that down the future pipeline of their core canon universe was a bad idea.
Yeah.
I put the name in the chat there. It's Future Robot Daltanius was the actual series that he wanted to bring over, not Gogar. But the Lion's Head motif would be incorporated into several Brave series robots, including Go Gaigar.
Yeah.
So there's a connection on that stuff, which is fun.
Well, yeah, it's
interesting enough. The robot was named D'Artagnan in Future Robot Daltanius, so that's weird.
Well, actually, the Three Musketeers as Mecha would be a great super robot show.
Okay.
If you think about it.
Yeah.
But what's interesting that you talk about those things that inspire future things. It's so funny the way that Robotech came together was there just happened to be 3 series that had enough superficial resemblance to one another that they were able to cobble them into one series.
Well, remember, Mos Pieta wasn't originally going to be the 3rd act.
Yeah,
it was supposed to be Orgus.
Yeah,
but he couldn't secure the rights for it.
Yeah, well, and the funny thing is that Orgus and Southern Cross, it's hard to believe when you hear that they're not related to Macross, because they have that whole Super Dimension pre-title, because there's Super Dimension Fortress Macross, and then there's Super Dimension Cavalry Southern Cross, and then Orgus is Super Dimension Century Orgus. It's like, and you're telling me these are unrelated, and it doesn't help that some cheeky animator thought it would be funny to draw an Orgroid on the deck of the SDF-1 in Macross, but they're unrelated.
And it's also like Mos Pieta is just a better show. Orgus was Super Dimension Cavalry is garbage. From even the Japanese version to the American version, it's just garbage.
Yeah, the mecha designs, I'm like, what were those?
Awful. And they ran out of money and they got canceled halfway through.
I mean, the best mecha designs.
You got a space helicopter? Come on.
Yeah, it's like the best mecha designs in that one, in my opinion, are in the American one would be the Robotech Masters Bioroids. Yes. I love the
Bioroids look an awful lot like the bad guys in Gundam.
The Zaku's, yeah.
They kind of you can see the I see what you did there.
What's funny is that Battletech has snuck a couple of Bioroids into their mecha designs in the clan mechs. They didn't learn their lesson stealing stuff from my own, but they changed them enough to where it's simply inspired by. Here's an interesting bit of trivia. With all of the mecha that they stole, they had the rights to use them, but that they borrowed for their initial Battletech run, especially from the Dugram. There's one perfectly serviceable machine that somehow didn't make it into their their mix, and it's the was it the Bushmaster? Not the Bushmaster. It's
Shadowhawk.
it's no. Well, so it's not in BattleTech. It didn't make it into BattleTech, even though it's a perfectly serviceable.
Is it a
mech.
Robotech mech, like a Macross mech?
Nope, it's a Dugram mech. It's a Dugram mech. It looks very much like the Griffin, which was originally the round face. It's let me look it up here. It's funny because what's cool is there's a guy who has made a miniature of it, and it's cool because he made a BattleTech miniature for it, even though it never made it into BattleTech.
You've got me curious because I think I've got all of them.
Yeah, well, I don't know what a Dugram mech is, so I'm just gonna.
Dugram is the original anime. It's
How do you spell it?
Like Doug Ram.
It's called the Bushman, and I'll see if I can pull it up here.
Oh, there's a Bushman mech.
There he is. Yeah, I see him.
No, there's
Yeah,
not
that
a
guy
mech
showed up
based
in-
on the Bushman in BattleTech.
There isn't, because it looks like every other BattleTech from
There's
that period.
they pulled in the Griffin, which is the round facer. They've got the Wolverine, which is the blockhead, I believe. They've got the Atlas, not the Atlas, the Battlemaster. They've got, but the Bushman did not get brought in at all, and which is weird because it's a perfectly serviceable design. Maybe they didn't bring it in because it was too close to the Griffin, what became the Griffin.
Oh, yeah. What's his name? Matt Mason made that miniature.
Yeah,
That's why I'm thinking of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I was thinking of the Griffin. That's why. Yeah.
He's gone ahead and done a bunch of designs based on the original Dugram style, or Dugram, whichever you pronounce it, style presentations. Which of course would have become the Unseen. This is the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
there was a period there after the Harmony Gold debacle where BattleTech mechs just looked like dog's breakfast. They were just so bad for a period.
They're horrible.
And now I find the new ones they're doing, the new stuff looks great. Like they've really gotten their design philosophy down, and the artists are doing a fantastic job. But man, when they were putting out those technical books, the width ones, most of the designs just looked like garbage.
They had some really weird designs. Like here's two giant LRM boxes with legs attached.
Yeah.
I think one thing that's really helped them is decades of refinement, but also having gone through several iterations of computer games where the artists doing the renders have really solidified BattleTech style. Because a lot of the new miniatures that are coming out for the game kind of mirror that the PC game iterations. But we're not here to talk about BattleTech. Which, although it's funny because my experience with anime stuff gave me one of my best Mech Warrior BattleTech memories ever, and that's our group at the local comic shop was a bunch of BattleTech players, and played with them before. We had a dedicated BattleTech night every week. When the clans came out, I dislike the clans. I am not a huge fan of the clans. They all decided to play a clan campaign, and I'm like, nah. Anyways, but so we played, and I decided because I was going to play a Freeborn, which if you don't know BattleTech, the Freeborn are the disgrace of the clans and their eugenic lifestyle. And so I played a Freeborn who had a mom and a dad and not a pod. But anyways, it was a Mech Warrior campaign, and so my best friend at the time, my buddy Garth, was running it as the GM. He and I role played forever, and role played outside of that group, and we're longtime gamers since like 8th grade. And he made it clear up front, we're playing an RPG. And so we all had Mech Warrior character sheets, and we were playing our battles out on a BattleTech board with the pieces like you would BattleTech, but we had RPG characters. And we were not bound by simple war game combat structure. The guys who were all wargamers couldn't get their head around that. And so here I am. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna take my my Phoenix Hawk 2C, and I want to jump jet over this guy and sort of wheel while I'm in the jump and use my gun to shoot directly at his head. And if I do that, can I use the strafing to hit chart? Which was all basically torso and headshots in Battletech. And the GM's like, cool, go ahead and roll it. So I'd roll my skill and I'd do it. And then I'd shoot and he'd assign a penalty because you're doing a trick and and I'd roll it and I'd succeed and I'd shoot the thing in the head. And the wargamers are just having fits because they're like, what the hell? And he would look at him like, he's role playing. He's playing his character. The mechs are not, and the mechs have never been depicted as just these Frankenstein's monsters. If you read the books, they're moving, especially the lighter mechs and the medium mechs. And like later on in the game, I got knocked down. I'm on my back. It's a city fight. I'm like, we're on concrete, right? He's like, yeah, it's like modern ferrocrete, state of the art current city. I'm like, I need to get out from under this big old assault mech that's over me. Can I just engage my jump jets and skid along the street down the city block? And he's like, roll it. And so I did. Squeak, sparks flying off my mech as he's like, take a point of damage on your back armor. I'm like, all right, squeak, just to get out from stompy, Atlas bait territory or whatever, because I had some giant assault mech getting ready to go into hand-to-hand combat. But yeah, the role player, the wargamers were just like, what do we do? I'm I'm role playing. And that's all the guy could. And he kept looking at him like, you guys can do that too? But they didn't know how. But yeah, that was my Battletech story.
So since we got back on the role playing aspect, I want to get your thoughts on this, Bear, because this is a discussion Eli and I had a while back. So when it comes to role playing, especially in mech games specifically, how do you convince your players to get out of their mech? Because my experience, again, we were playing Robotech and Gundam, but the players convinced me, why do I need to get out of my mech? Why am I sent on a mission? I am a mech pilot, trained specifically to pilot said mech.
Yep.
Why am I going out on an espionage mission? What's the point? So what would your incentive be to get these players out of their mechs?
You run into this problem in another interesting place as well, which is anytime you run a Battlestar Galactica game set in classic Battlestar Galactica, which is I'm a Viper pilot. I fly a Viper. Why am I going on these? Well, let's look at the episodes where they went on the super secret.
The quick answer is that's the show.
Yeah, the show does it all the time too, though. So that's the thing. Second answer is, I'm sorry, were we playing a war game or were we playing an RPG? Like, that's literally what I would say to my players at that point in time. I'd be like, we came here to play characters in this universe, not to play giant stompy robots on a battle grid. If you want to play giant stompy robots on a battle grid, absolutely happy to bust out the maps and the miniatures and play from there. But if you're here to play characters in this story, your command officers are sending you on this mission because you're highly trained, competent heroes. At that point, it's always going to boil down, because I always hear these stories, these types of things from people about RPG stuff, and I just go, maybe session 0 helps, I don't know, but maybe also just finding new players helps at some point, because if players aren't willing to buy in to what the campaign is or what the game is that you're running, and they just want it to be one way and only that way, they're not being part of the solution. They're not being part of the fun. They're just presenting themselves as a problem.
Mage's Musings comments, here's how I've often taken it in like Robotech and stuff. You are military. There's a command structure. It doesn't help that there are series where it really didn't make sense, especially like, remember Space Above and Beyond?
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, that's not how the Marines do it.
We'll not get on that.
Although,
they went from being Marine pilots to Marine Force Recon. What?
My hand wavium for that is that, who knows, in the far future, maybe because that was a very gritty science fiction sort of set, it gritty-ish. Your soldiers have to be more multi-purpose because your resources out on the fringes are going to be limited. So you can't just sit there and say, I'm sorry, we've got all these capable guys sitting around, but they're just pilots. Which is kind of what Battlestar was coming from too. If you think about it, Battlestar, we're like, we've got these men.
And they're all we got.
Yeah, they're warriors too. Remember, they are warriors. They're not pilots. I have a feeling in the Battlestar universe, for example, it's easy to just like, you're a warrior. That's your whole culture.
Yep.
You know,
Mhm.
but Robotech is definitely weird. But at the same time, it's like, did you come here to play Robotech? Or, again, did you come here to play? Because look at the shows. They're always out of their mecha.
Well,
They're always
Yeah,
doing
and
stuff.
which
Well, with
era of Robotech are
Robotech,
you playing?
yeah, well, with Robotech, specifically with the Palladium system, your character, the way you built it, you could multitask. You could be that Battletech pilot who could go onto an espionage mission because of the way the skill set is made. But with other RPGs, a lot of them, you're a mecha pilot. This is what you do. Okay, so how am I supposed to hack into this computer because my character doesn't know how to do it? That's where a lot of the role playing aspect problems come in, is the way the character class itself is set up or the skills available to said characters.
Yeah, I ran into a similar problem in a conversation on Facebook. I think you were even actually in on this, Jason, is that I was talking about Star Trek in this one. I'm like,
Yeah.
keeping players engaged at the table while trying to. My problem is like I ended up getting myself on the other side of that, which is the argument, the meme-ish argument of like, why is it that all the senior officers are always going down to the planet?
Yeah.
And it doesn't make sense. But when you're playing an RPG, your players want to be involved in the action. So you can't really go, all right, well, chief engineer player character, you just wait here because there's nothing for you engineering wise on the planet below. I mean, there are other solutions. You can do troop play, where everybody has multiple characters, so they can kind of flex and play the character for the mission, or you can just go with the old series. I mean, some of the answers I got were kind of weren't overly helpful because people are like, well, just make sure that there's something in every scenario for every character. I'm like, that is really not going to work because then every scenario ends up being the same freaking mission. All right, well, we're on a diplomatic mission with a bunch of primitive tribals, but somehow I have to work the engineer into this. We're going on a peaceful planet where there's literally no weapon forbidden by some sort of cosmic law. Let's make sure the security chief is there. Yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think Bear nails it too, is that you are always going to be at the mercy of your players to a degree, and if you can't convince your players to, this is why, going back to the topic, why most mecha games continue to get played divorced from what brought everybody, I won't say everybody, but what brings the anime fans to the table. Because your mecha games are often going to be full of people who just like giant stompy robots. Your gunplug guy who comes in and wants, he doesn't care about the shows, he just likes the models, and now he wants to play with a giant stompy robot. Yeah, you're going to run into that as well. But that's going to be any game. There are some games that don't rely on it as much, like playing D&D. You really don't need a lot of buy-in from your players unless you're trying to flex into a specific story or genre of fantasy. If you're doing generic D&D as a whole, everybody can kind of come to the table evenly. But if you're doing Ravenloft and nobody wants to get spooky, then you're gonna fail.
Yeah.
Your game is gonna fail,
like,
not you. I mean, that's very you're a suck ass GM because you can't manage it. No, that's not what we're saying. And Bear disappeared, so I must have insulted him.
Yeah, but Lancer is a great mech RPG game where it does do a really good balance of getting you out of the mech and having you have a good reason as to why to get out of the mech. Very good balance game. It's a shame that it doesn't have a larger following.
It's a good comment from. I'm gonna change this so Jason doesn't keep getting eaten up by the comments all the time. Let's see if I can figure this out. How do I get it to where the comments don't? I guess you're just gonna get killed by the comments. Sorry.
It's okay. I'm not that pretty anyway. I'm ugly.
Yes, the cool parts of the game, and forget the character part. That's true of any game. Your wife Raven perked up at the. Well, it's her loft. I mean, that's just her apartment. She just tell her that. I said that. Of course, Ravenloft is her apartment. It's her dream home. But so I don't know the woman, but she sounds very nice, and I already dig her because of the comment. But another interesting. So Mechton, going back to Mechton, and what Bear's earlier comment about everybody's snobby and stuff. I actually found a Mechton Discord, and I was very excited for the 2 hours I existed on that Discord. I came on there. I'm like, cool. A bunch of Mechton heads, whatever the actual name is. That's not the official name, so whatever.
Yeah.
And I went in there and I decided they've got an area where you kind of pitch your campaign, right? And I pitched my campaign idea that I've had for Mechton for a while, and this is a fun one. It was a design. I thought it was fun. It was designed as a Mechton campaign using the classic Algol-based, Mechton Empire type setting where it's all kinds of mecha exist simultaneously in that universe, from super robot to real robot to combiners to all of that. That's the default canned Mechton universe. And I always had this idea of running a campaign where the players all played some form of a group of mecha performers. It's because in the universe of Mechton, mecha is used for everything. It's recreation, it's construction, it's racing, it's war. And so this idea of mecha performers, whether that was a circus or racers or stunt guys, like extreme mecha sports, whatever, because it was the 90s when I came up with the idea. So everything was a giant extreme. And I just got ripped apart by this group. Oh, that's silly. What's the poll? Oh, that sounds like a one-shot, one-trick. I'm like, any theme doesn't last very long. It's only going to be fun for like the first 3 sessions. I'm like, dudes, that's any genre.
I can have 3 whole sessions? Oh my God. That's a record these days.
Well, the thing is, though, is any concept that you come up with is only worth 3 sessions worth of play unless you make it worth more. Because my thought as the GM who was going to run this is the idea is this group of mecha performers, whatever they are, get caught in the middle of a bigger war. They're on some planet, war comes to the planet. They then have to rally together with what machines they have and find a way to fight a guerrilla fight for survival. It's very anime. It's very Star Blazers. It's very Underdog. It's very Macross.
Macross that did that, where they're musicians and the guy takes his guitar into space.
And I mean, there is precedent
Macross
for
7.
it, but the whole idea was
like everyone hates.
the whole idea was that was just the start. And then, I got ripped on for like, well, what kind of characters can you possibly have? And like, have you met carnies? I'm like, have you met circus people?
How many are ex-military?
Or a former spy or running from the law or just wants to get out. Any character could fit in there and be somebody else. Or you could just have the happy clown whose character arc is dealing with having to become a warrior. I am a clown by nature. I'm here to make people happy. What is life like when I've got to fight for my life? And then you've got all the backgrounds of those characters coming into play as, wait, I'm a former military guy. We might be able to get some support from Captain Da-da-da, who I used to serve in blah, blah, blah. But he's three systems away and we'll have to go through the enemy. It writes itself. And man, they just tore me apart. I'm like, and I left. I'm like, if this is, again, that whole narrow, this is what we want it, this is how we see it, and nothing else applies. That's just, I'm like, I don't get it. But
it's the problem you're always going to run into in a lot of these types of more gear-based games. Everybody just wants to play, heavy metal. Not heavy metal, sorry, Heavy Gear Solid Snake. That's all they want to do. Mm-hmm. They don't want to play, Macross ever. They want to play, I got cool shit and I kill things because that's what I like to do. And it really, really, really becomes a problem when you have to suddenly take them out of that world and put them somewhere different, somewhere where they're not just the kick-ass assassin guy going around murdering everybody.
That's the funny thing, is one of the primary counters or other ways of looking at a better way to run my kind of story was, well, what if they were a bunch of doctors? I'm like, how is that any better? Well, it would give them motivation and conflict as they had to come to terms. And it's every argument this person would make, I'm like, and so does my game, and so does my idea, and they'd be like, but I don't see how. And that's the big thing. It's like they were so married to that you're wrong that they just couldn't see that everything that they were talking about for their idea as a counter to mine was exactly mine. And it's not that my idea is great, but what?
Question: what are doctors doing piloting mechs?
Well, in the Mechton universe, as default, I could see like an ambulance mech kind of a thing. Like, you are a mecha that has a box on its back that you set down in the field, and it's
I could see one, with a small fire team supporting them, maybe, but
and
there weren't squads of medics in the military where they're just like, let's just send in the medic squad.
Well, and of course they were riffing off of my idea. Like, you could argue, what are performers doing with mecha too? But and so maybe they are.
You can go back on this. You can go back on this to stuntmen and circus performers, like you said. What is that Marvel comic about the motorcycle riding stunt guys? Team America.
Well, there's IGPX, which was a whole anime about mecha racers. It was basically roller derby in mecha.
There you go.
In transforming mecha, no less, because it was like they would transform into race car mode and go around a track and then flip into humanoid mode and brawl on the track like while they're skating along like roller derby.
Yeah.
It was a great show, actually. Honestly, I'm like, why is that not? I know it was a video game. It did get turned into a video game. But like, why is that not at least a board game? But yeah, and that was the thing. I mean, I would not even argue that there's not a way to do their medical thing. Maybe they're a Doctors Without Borders kind of a thing. And in a mecha universe, their vehicle of choice is, you backpack through the mountains of whatever planet you land on with your field hospital box on your back. You set down your little base camp. I can see it. So I have no problem with their concept in and of itself. The problem I had with their concept it was as an argument, in deference to or in preference to mine. It's like, and not that my idea is necessarily sacrosanct and golden, but it was, they were literally arguing the same thing against my idea. But I only really brought that up as a demonstration of that, like some of the problems within mecha gaming, and then also what you're talking about with that whole mine is cool, yours sucks kind of attitude.
So in the film industry, this is something we used to encounter in the film industry. I used to work with a stunt guy who was really like a salty maritimer, used to be a stunt car driver, used to be an underwater arc welder. Like he's lived his life. And he used to get really arsed off with people in the film industry who used to refer to them as bottom feeders. And I said, well, how do you tell? He goes, they invent an arcane language around the simplest things that only they understand so that you won't know what they're talking about. And I see that a lot in these RPG communities. I see it in the mech community for sure. These ideas that it's the gatekeeper, attitude. Yeah. It's I know the secrets of the cult, and unless you know the secrets of the cult and think the way the cult does, you don't get to join. Marry that with the other thing I hate most about the internet.
See, also 3D printing.
Well, yeah.
As a hobby. Oh my God.
The thing I hate literally the most about the internet is this. Hey, guys, I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to buy a red ball or a blue ball. I've narrowed it down to these two balls, but I can't make a decision. What do you think? Well, have you thought about a green ball? Well, why isn't purple on the choice? I mean, that mixes the two together. How come you're not getting a triangle? How come you're not getting a triangle? I mean, squares are obviously better. And you just go, fuck, I was asking for a binary answer here.
Yeah.
Not explore deeper into the roots of it all.
Yeah,
right?
It's like
so you combine that.
Things, yeah.
You combine that with the gatekeeping, and then you show up with this idea, and they're like, blah, 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 blah. "No, that doesn't fit anything I've ever heard of." No,
yeah, it was so bad that I even went to one of the admins and I private messaged him like, "Is it always like this here?" He's like, "I don't know." He's like, "I don't know what's going on." And I'm like, "All right, well, I'm out.
I'm gonna go bye." Yeah.
But yeah, Jason, you got into 3D printing, and I don't know if you ran into it, but I'm on 3D printing groups. I don't 3D print, but I'm on the groups, and that is a very gatekeepy, no one sees the wizard kind of a community.
Yeah, they're horrible. They're as bad as, and like Eli said, I used to do prop building. They're as bad as cosplaying community, where I designed this. and blah blah blah. Why did you use my design? Well, dude, you didn't get Disney's license approval to make your Boba Fett or Stormtrooper or Luke Skywalker or lightsaber, 3D
Yeah.
printed. I love the community. It's a horrible community.
Yeah, I find it really weird. Somebody will come in and they say, what resin is best?" And you'll get some people legitimately answering, but then there's the other half who's like, "Well, why don't you do some research?"
Yeah, I hate that
read
answer.
up on this?
Do some research.
This is what fucking killed me for Linux.
It's
This is
this
why
weird,
I
like,
stopped using
I have
Linux
earned
with
my
this.
stripes. You must earn your
Yeah,
stripes.
yeah.
My
That's-
trauma must be shared.
Yeah, I literally was going over to Ubuntu a couple of years ago, and I was having some troubles with a drive issue. It wasn't recognizing the external drive, and I said, "Oh, here, go to this place and talk about it." And I went, and I watched any female that showed up and had a question had 6,000 answers helping her, and people offering to write scripts for her. I said, "Hey guys, I'm having trouble with this," and then I got like grilled on like, "Well, why aren't you telling us this? And how come you don't tell me this thing? And I need to know this thing on top of it." I'm like, "Holy fuck!" If I just pretended to be a chick, you'd have fixed my fucking problem for me, wouldn't you?
And
So
that
this
is the day that Bear adopted a female persona.
Yeah, exactly. Barina. This is
Barina.
exactly what happens in the mecha community as well, to a certain extent. Hey, how do you build this in Game Blurn? Well, bro, why don't you just go read the rules and do it yourself? Hey, how did you guys handle this problem? And it drives me up the wall. It turns me off of things. It makes me not interested in things. It's just like, fuck you. You are not an ambassador for your hobby. You're a gatekeeping asshole.
You see it so much.
Yeah.
If we're going to go back to the core, where I think a lot of us came in here from the old school, or even just general like fantasy RPGs. I'm new to GMing. Got any advice? And while yes, I have been guilty of the most often commented, well, just dive in and do it, right? The whole just do it, which is, I think, a valid suggestion. It's usually the start of my discussion. Just do it, but but there's so many people like, oh, how do I deal with my trouble, my problem player? Kill his character.
Oh God.
Yeah, that's a cop out right there.
Or have you tried this? Have you tried have you tried a hate mail chain and smearing his name in the city council? Not an actual example, but it gets almost that bad. Like, have you tried hunting down his next of kin, kidnapping them, tying them up in a back room, and telling that he better play better, or else the kitten gets it? I mean, come on, people, how are you useful?
But this is a larger issue in the online world. It goes beyond just our hobby. I mean, I've watched a couple of women who are sort of having issue with the online thing against men that's going on right now, and they point out how every time a woman posts something on TikTok saying, "My husband won't do the dishes," they're like, the first 8 responses are, "Divorce him!" Like, Jesus Christ! Like, do we have subtle degrees anymore? And that's the problem with a lot of this gatekeeping in gaming. There are no subtle degrees. So when a noobler shows up and says, "Hey, I don't know what to do. Can someone help me?" They get, crotchety old stink face who shows up and goes, well, that's someone who's not going to partake in the hobby. That means sales are going to go down. And ultimately, if you do enough of that shit, our hobby vanishes.
Full Metal Dragon puts it really succinctly here. Get good, newbie scrub, is a common response.
And then some of it also is, newbies, they go to the larger popular sites that have like 10,000 members on there. They post something, and this has happened to me, and I'm sure Eli also, we'll put in our advice, good general advice, then it gets buried by all the shit talkers. So your advice gets lost.
You'll put in good, solid advice, and some guy will come in and like just tell you how shit-tastic it is. I'm like, I'm sorry. I thought it was presenting a holistic, workable solution that might actually generate a positive outcome.
Well, you're wrong, because I live in a basement and I hate myself.
Hello,
bees. Oh, I'm sorry.
Your giant house panther, and then I have my giant house panther.
This is just one. There's also the giant.
I have to laugh at myself, and you might appreciate this. So I recently put like a little pet bed on this chair for Ophelia back here, and I realized recently that the cat and the pet bed have the same texture because I was petting the pillow for 3 minutes the other day, and then realized I wasn't touching the cat. I'm like, oh, hello, how's it going?
His brother's long hair, and he sheds a lot, so I have to vacuum like twice a week on the carpet for all the cat hair.
Yeah.
And one day I got up I woke up to get ready for work, and I was walking out of the bedroom, and there was so much cat hair right by the stairs. I honestly thought for a brief second, my brain was like, don't step on the cat. And I stepped around it like, oh, and I'm like, that's not even a cat. What the hell? Are you done? What's this? What's up? Playing this game today?
But yeah, I guess to bring it around from the problems with mecha games and why they don't stick around, because I think really that is why the mecha games and even anime games haven't really gained the traction. Like, like Big Eye Small Mouth is probably one of the largest, most prolific anime themed rule systems out there.
Yeah.
But it's still very niche and like very cultish, not cultish in the bad way, but like cult following kind of a thing. And I think part of it is just like, again, there's a major disjoint between the expectation when you're coming into a game and then what people end up getting at a game table when they're coming in for an anime game, whether it's mecha or otherwise. But there are really only so many solutions you can come up with. I mean, obviously finding players who are into it as much as you are and who get it the same way that you do is the number one best way. Find people who are cool playing the weird, subplots, not even weird, the subplots that come up in mecha. I mean, if you look at Gundam, we've got, post-traumatic stress syndrome characters like Amaru goes through in even the first Gundam. I mean, Gundam just pulls no punches from the very get-go. 1980, they come rolling out, and you got this teenager who ends up thrust into a war and literally suffers from PTSD on screen in front of you in several episodes. But also there's the romantic subplots, there's the deaths of loved ones, there's the ever famous falling in love with the alien pilot or enemy pilot plot line.
Love triangles.
The siblings split. Weird thing is so even in going back to Gundam again, I thought Gundam Origin, the whole Char's origin bit was inventing a lot of stuff because I hadn't seen Mobile Suit before I saw it. I'm like, and I had always known the basics of Mobile Suit. I didn't realize how much of that infighting and politicking and his secret origin and all of that was written from the very beginning. I thought that was something they made up for Origin, but the fact that he's not who he says he is. He's the guy who killed the guy who he says he is so he could get revenge. The big subplot for that character the entire time is I became a dictator just so I could get revenge for my parents' death.
Char, is that who you're talking about?
Yeah, Char. Yeah. Char Aznavour, yeah.
I can never understand why people are crazy about him because I only tried to watch Gundam and never sat through.
Bad guy. He's the
Darth Vader. Knowing that's his ultimate plot line, I'm like, oh, that's actually really kind of cool. I like that.
And then the blonde on the other side is his sister. They were separated as children when he left. He left her assuming Char's identity. He's not even Char. Char is the guy he killed.
So my problem with Gundam was the protagonist. I hated him.
Amaru, yeah.
I hated him. Every time he was on screen, I wanted to punch my TV.
Unfortunately, that's something Gundam suffers from, is they always want to put some reluctant teenager or person in the cockpit of the main mecha. It's not. That's why I think some of the newer stories are a little bit better, but even Unicorn, which is one of the newest one, puts a high school kid in the cockpit of the Unicorn. Hathaway's. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the UC timeline is pretty much all the same story with different characters and subtle changes to the plot. It's the brown-haired kid that's a reluctant pilot against a pretty blonde guy that's the leader of the bad guys, and there's a moral dilemma, and they go through some shit, and they both end up dying in one way or another.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest twists on that has been the whole Hathaway's Flash bit. And even he's reluctant, but he's not reluctant in the classic, I never wanted to be a fighter in the first place. He's more reluctant, I have to do this. This is what I have to do to make things right, but then again, that's the newest really one of the newest Gundams, and very much you can see watching it that it's got some more modern sensibilities in it. But yeah, and I mean, of course, but the thing is, all of that is something that you were probably looking for if you're a fan of mecha anime and you're coming to a game table wanting to play it. You're likely looking for that. But whether or not it actually gets played out, and here's the other thing, whether or not it's actually feasible to play that out at a game table and have it hit is questionable. Like, that's a lot of, I mean, even, there's a lot of, I mean, they tried that with an official Mechton product. There was Operation Rimfire. Remember that one book? And every scenario was so full of notes to make it land anime style, and it used pre-gens. So there was always that relationship between the pre-made relationship between the characters. And I think that's one thing that maybe would help if you're doing an anime game, is to maybe very much consider either a very strong session 0 where everybody solidifies those relationships between their characters, or using pre-gens to tell the story. Because
I am a huge fan of the idea of the pre-gen for stuff like this, because if you're going to have such a deep story to tell, you need to make sure, listen, one of you has to be Princess, one of you has to be Condor Joe, one of you has to be Straight Lace Mark, one of you has to be Rudy Toot Toot Toot, the weird tech kid, one of you has to be Tiny, the fat guy. Pick your sheet, here's your mech that goes with you, let's go.
Yeah, that's, I think that if you're gonna make it work, you've got to maybe, and that's again, that could be another reason that they don't take off, is because there's a lot of heavy lifting to make it work right. I already mentioned, like, if you're going to make an original mecha universe, as a GM, you're already sitting down and coming up with, a dozen or 24 mecha designs, depending on your universe. Or you could start with just a few and do it sort of how they did in the original series, is like, here's our few that we know about to begin with. Oh, look, it's time for a new mecha to get introduced. I've made this design. That's kind of how Gundam built it. It's like, oh, we started out with Zaku's and a gun tank and a gun cannon, and that was it. And then they sort of Monster of the Weeked it for a while, where like, oh, look, the Zeons, they have a new mecha, which then of course is only because the Zeons are essentially modeled after Nazis.
Essentially.
Well,
kind of, sorta.
Down to not, I mean, even if, I mean, I wouldn't say, so that's the simplification, obviously, because what I really mean by that is they're based after that, their whole military is also based after that World War II. The whole Gundam franchise is based after that World War II dichotomy of one side uses a very narrow number of mecha that they refine and perfect and are reliable, and they use what they have, and the other one has the crazy Wunderwaffen, the Wunderwaffen every time they come out in the battlefield, like, look at our crazy ass new giant tank with 15 guns. That's the Zeons. They've got, and to the point where later on in the storyline, the Zeons are like, this isn't working. We need to have a unified parts program, because they were written very much, which makes sense, because of course, when did it come out? When people were still feeling that the echoes of the post-war experience were still there. Japan during World War II also suffered from some of that, trying to come up with the new big thing that would beat the Detroit Steelworks that they were fighting against.
Yeah.
But yeah,
no,
so
you're not wrong. You're not wrong at all on that.
Yeah, but that also makes it a good way to play the game. If you want to reduce that heavy lifting from the beginning, come up with a good solid core of 5 mecha, 2 or 3 on each side. And then your bad guys get the new ones all the time. So you're constantly keeping your players guessing, which is sort of the monster aspect of D&D or anything too. Like, oh, look, it's the new thing with the blah, blah, blah system. And then slowly but surely through the play of your campaign, here's your new mecha, oh heroes. You saw that in kind of Robotech, where they started out with just Valkyries, and then they got the Valkyrie boosters, and then they got the full armor Valkyrie, and the Zentradi was like, oh, here's some fighter pods, and then here's these, and then, oh shit, they got power armor now. because the Quadron Luz, those female power armors, those are badass. I love those. But yeah, I mean, you can play it, and again, we've got about a half an hour here, so left here. So I sort of didn't want this to all be just a giant bitch fest about why mecha games don't work and haven't worked, because they can work. And how do you do it? We already talked about getting your players to accept that this is the genre. You have to get out of your mecha. I think the other thing too is, as a GM, you also have to give them reasons to get out of their mecha. Even in Gundam, those people will hop out of their mecha and have a bazooka fight in the hulk of an old spaceship. Yeah, we've seen it where Char and Amaru are going through that ship, booby trapping each other and stuff in their spacesuits. You got to sneak around the Robotech Master spaceship to find the intelligence, whatever it is. Yeah. You give them reasons, but also the players have to be willing to play that. And a lot of that stuff in those shows comes in the downtime that everybody talks about downtime in like D&D. In a mecha show, there's a lot of downtime. There's a lot of going out on a date with that new girl that you met in the office, in the mess, or that you run into that pretty green-haired lady who ends up being an alien pilot, or or the blue-haired girl with the 80s sweater off the shoulder from Zeta Gundam. And oh no, she's a cloned super new type who's gonna come after me in the Psycho Gundam later on. But you have to you give them those things to do, hopefully that they will want to do. But that's also going to come down to the characters that they're making. I mean, one of the best Gundams, in my opinion, that really kind of breaks the mold is 0080. Your main character is a 10-year-old. And he's never in the suit of a mecha. He is a 10-year-old living on a colony who's mecha obsessed like every other. He's basically a self-insert for the mecha fans. And he doesn't care which side it is. He likes the bad guys and the good guys, and he's constantly drawing the mobile suits in his notebooks in class. And his dad works for Anaheim Electronics and is working on the new Gundam project. He doesn't know this, and so he makes friends with a downed Zaku pilot who is then recruited by a bunch of intelligence operatives to try and destroy the new prototype Gundam. And the main character throughout the whole thing is this 10-year-old, and he falls into helping the bad guys because he's friends with the guy, and it's a very human story. Yes, there's big stompy robot action in there, and at the end of the 6 episodes, it's only 6 episodes long too. That's crazy. At the end of the 6 episodes, Bernie, his friend, who's the Zaku pilot, is dead, and Christina McKenzie, the test pilot for the new Gundam model that's on his space colony, which is why the whole action all takes place, is like injured and demoted and gets sent away. She's like his next door neighbor that he's grown up with, and stuff like that. So he knows her. So at the end of the show, he's crying. He's bawling his eyes out at this assembly at his school that's being reconstructed after being destroyed in a combat. And the final line of the show is his friends patting him on the back. Don't worry, Al. There'll be another war soon. Because they think he's upset because the war's over. It's a very human story. And again, most of the action is out of the cockpit. There's cut scenes to officers doing, evil officer things and mecha fights. But
I want to point out what Mage Sean just posted. It's really good. And I think game systems, something we don't see in mecha games, maybe I'm wrong, I haven't read them all, but we see it in fantasy games, a lot of different fantasy games, is motivations being part of your character build, or passions, or what have you. And if you add something like that to a game where you have to put in interpersonal, like what's his goal, what are his motive, where his or her motives in that regard, romance, being left the fuck alone, whatever it is, then you can maybe engage them more because you're still using the game system. And that's something that the players who are itching for mecha combat, it's that they like the game system. So as long as you're giving them a mechanical thing to interact with, doesn't have to be super complex, it may encourage them to buy in more for the out of shit. I don't know.
I think if you're running an anime-based
Yeah.
game, mecha-based, mecha or otherwise, you have to have that on the sheet somewhere. It has to be part of the game. And that is the good thing that came out of Beam Saber. Beam Saber being a Powered by the Apocalypse, or not Powered by the Apocalypse. I keep misquoting
Blades
that.
Against the Dark.
Blades Against it. Well, I'm going back too far in the
Blades in
DNA.
the Dark, whatever, yeah.
Yeah, because Blades in the Dark is based on Powered by the Apocalypse and da-da-da. And so, anyways, the point being is that with that kind of a game system that focuses more on the story of the thing and less on the mechanics of the thing, although they found a way to also work on the mechanics of your mecha because they know it's a good thing. My problem wasn't so much with the game in its base, it's just how crazy their community was with what they came up with. And on their website, they published all this community input, which is cool. But I'm like, is there really a place for Vegeta in a mecha story?
Vegeta?
Dragon Ball.
Dragon Ball.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Not a huge fan myself, but I know the character. But my point is, like, it's a weird disjoint. I mean, you could tell a mecha story, I guess, and I'm going to fall back on something I've said about like the 5th edition development for D&D. There's a lot of push against all of the nifty rules and all of the options that have come out for it. But at the end of the day, that does give you a wonderful toolbox as a GM if you want to break from the standard mold. And so I guess in Beam Saber's defense, with all of that community input, you now have a massive library of anime character archetypes that you could pull from to tell your particular story of anime mecha. And Mechton did that too, in that, like, they said, here's all the different mecha stories that are out there, but they also made the later versions of their game also made it to where you could play human-sized robots if you wanted to, using their construction system. So if you wanted to do something like, any of the Super Sentai kind of things with Mechton, you could do it. So that is a benefit for having all of that weird wackadoo, create, input in there and all those weird options. They don't all fit, obviously. Your crazy Vegeta character is not going to fit in Gundam, but if you wanted to make a story where you had super mecha pilots, like say a Super Robot series, you could do that with Beam Saber also. So I guess it's a feature, not a bug.
And what I always thought would be a great mech game using the 5e system would be Escaflowne, because it is fantasy and it involves a lot of things that are in D&D. You have the I can't remember who the character was. That's a lion. He's a king of some country, and then you have the cat girls, and I think it would really work for it. It's just getting people to play it.
Yeah, and that's, that all trails back to the thing that Bear mentioned, where, like, that's not the game I want, so it sucks. Never mind, like, okay, then I'm not talking to you. At this point, like, when you put out a cattle call for something and somebody comes in like, I don't like that, it's like, this clearly wasn't for you. Move along.
Was walking by not an option for you?
Like, you
had
walk
to
by
stop?
the hot dog cart on the street and go, hot dogs suck, I don't like them. No, you just walk onto the taco truck.
Whoa, there's a taco truck?
Well, there's
In
always
Texas,
a
there
taco
are
truck.
taco trucks.
Not in Montreal, man.
I think in Texas there's a quota requirement for taco trucks, but
There is.
I'm
Yet
sorry,
another reason I shouldn't move to Texas.
you're out of compliance with city ordinance. Da 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 da. You only have 12 taco trucks on this block. I mean, honestly, Seattle alone has enough food trucks. I mean, it was getting pretty good up there too. And then Portland, really cool. They have an entire street dedicated to food trucks in the city of Portland. So it's neat. Just actually a block from me, there is a big community park that has a giant parking lot that 3 times a month they have a taco truck night there. And I have missed every one of them in the year I have been here. I am such a bad fat guy. I think I need to get my fat guy union card pulled.
I can arrange that for you.
I'm sure you can.
I'm well connected in the fat guy union.
I'm sorry, sir. Your taco count is woefully low.
What is this? Lettuce?
I'm sorry, son. Can you step out of the vehicle? Why, sir? What have I done something wrong? I think I smell kale on your breath.
Glad you have an open container of celery in the car, sir.
Is that a green drink in your car? Oh, all right. We've reached that point where all of us are just done. So we are at 30 minutes left, give or take. I'd like to put it out to the community. You have 3 wizened old fellows here,
Be right back. Someone at my door.
-1. So go ahead and throw out any questions or comments you might have that maybe we've glanced over or that have occurred to you, and I will pick them out. I've been trying as we went along to keep up, but the conversation is good. A good part of, actually, I need a shout out to GM Cody. A good part of today's conversation came from some of the work him and I have been doing together on the Mecha Miniatures game that Jason knows that I've been kicking around and talking about for a decade.
Yeah, that game it's going to be good. And that also goes into what we were talking about with the one-shotting. When it comes to the miniatures, like with the I don't know how much I could say. The
Be
very
general.
the very light mech that we were talking about.
Yeah.
That would be one that would really fall into that one-shot category where it would only have like one hit point, boom, it's gone. But why is it dead? I have like 50 of them. Well, exactly. They're frontline troops. You've got 50 of them. They're made for cannon fodder.
Well, yeah, and that that was about part of the whole thing about that when I've been making that game system and Cody's to Cody's credit here, he has managed to, in the week that we've been talking about it, get me motivated enough and give me enough feedback to get it into a play testable state. But the big header for this that I want it to be different from other miniatures games, Mecha Miniatures games, is I want it to be anime feel first and mechanical crunch as a complete secondary.
Mm-hmm.
It should be about theme and style in the play, to where when you're playing it, you feel like you're watching one of those cool fight scenes in your show, and you're not getting bogged down with, oh, I've only got 15 fuel left. I've only got 5 shots in my gun. I mean, ammo factors in some places, but only in weapon systems where it's like critically limited, like a large missile, But yeah, I wanted to give Cody a shout out for his, if he's still here, for his assistance in that, and also for sparking this line of thinking, because in talking to him about it, like realize, and kind of discussing back and forth the concept of theme over system crunch, it got me thinking about why it is that, why haven't I seen mecha games take off? Because even in the 80s, when mecha seemed to be everywhere, and we didn't see more than not even a handful, a couple fingers full of mecha and anime games. And Barrett mentioned it, I think, on another stream. They were there. Yes, there was a Bubblegum Crisis RPG, but nobody bought it and played it.
Except for me.
I bought it, but I only bought it because I wanted the information on the universe, because it was a great source book. There was a Votoms game, although I think those came out in the 90s, not the 80s. But either way,
with the ammo aspect, I like the way that the Fast Grim and Cyborg RPGs do it, where it's basically roll a 1d8, 1 through 4. You've got ammo, keep going. You roll a 5 through 8, you're out of ammo, time to reload. That'd be that's a great mechanic to use. You don't have to keep track about ammo or anything like that.
Yeah, I just kind of hand waved the whole thing, except for
yeah, with missiles, yeah, I agree. You definitely want to keep track of your missile count.
Well, even some of the missile launchers in the game have no ammo, because they're just like,
mini missiles.
Yeah, exactly. That's the other thing I have to keep reminding myself. While I was inspired by property X, Y, and Z, I do not have to limit myself to how they did it. The only thing I have to do is remember to keep it feeling like anime. So that I have my own universe set up for it. I get to use that universe to make sense out of things. Like, for example, in Gundam, there's a huge problem with mobile suits made for space being able to function on land. So they have land types and they have space types, and nary the two shall meet kind of thing. Like if a mobile suit goes through reentry, it's dead unless it's specifically designed to do so or has extra equipment, because they're going for that real robot feel. And so you have ground types and stuff. And I found Cody and I were talking when I was leaning that way, and I'm like, I don't have to do that. I don't have to do that. I can just say that the mecha in my universe are powerful enough and built out of unobtainium enough to where they can do it, and they can function in both places. I just need to make sure there are rules for ground combat and air combat and space combat. But I don't have to bog down. I don't have to limit myself by one specific universe. But anyways, I did want to open the floor to a couple comments, and Bear is back. So let's see. What do we got here? RW Bishop, are there any iconic villains in Mecha universes? Char Aznable is probably one of your number one. I mean, he's got Happy Meals. He's got
a Toyota.
He's got a Toyota. He's got a PC design. I love the computer designs that came out for the Gundam ones, where the Char Aznable's Red Comet one and the Amaru's Gundam one had different specs that for the computers that were kind of lining up with how their mecha are portrayed. Like I think Char's was super fast because the Red Comet is like super fast. But yeah, if you want to talk iconic, I don't think you're ever going to get any more iconic than Char Aznable as far as mecha villains. He is literally Japan's Darth Vader.
Yes.
Because Gundam is Japan's Star Wars, so there are some others that
Breetai from Macross would be.
Breetai is an interesting one too. Yeah, cool. Because he starts out being very, very flat, very cardboard, and then he ends up getting nuance over time because that's anime. That's one thing that if you're gonna run villains in anime, seldom are they ever I'm going to kill you. Even though like when you watch them portrayed in the US, they often get cast that way. Like if like the in Voltron, was it Emperor Zarkon or whatever his name was. He's always like, I'm gonna get you. And then what is it? I guess Deslock or Deslar or whatever his name is from Space Cruiser Yamato was a little more nuanced, but he would also be another iconic one. He's not Mecha universe, but he is an anime war universe.
You could even say, I don't know how to pronounce this correctly, Bird Katse from Gatchaman, aka what is Battle of the Planets?
Voltron.
Oh yeah.
Zoltar.
Zoltar is another one. I'm gonna get you, princess.
Yeah, I mean,
but when you go to Bird Katse, you're dealing with basically a character that is so complex that there was no way they could tell that story in North American version at all.
Is there a mecha game where you play an AI that can simply be transferred from one vehicle or robot to another? The answer to that simply is yes. There is a mecha game that you can do that, because you just need to pick one of the various generic mecha games and make that a part of your universe. Mechton specifically has rules for it. There are rules for AIs. There are even some mecha universes that feature some AI, usually in a form of co-pilot, like in 5-Star Stories. The Mortar Heads have, which is the name of their mecha, big giant cathedral mechas. If you've ever seen Mamoru Nagano's stuff that he does, it's just amazing. Like it mecha raised to actual like art. He in that universe, every mecha has two components to their piloting. You have the actual pilot, who's called a headliner, and then you have his Fatima, which is like these genetically engineered, like living AIs. Kind of think of it like almost like a Mentat from Dune, where their whole function is to basically run the subsystems of the mecha, but also their mecha have a degree of fantastic technology where they can even sometimes function even when there's no pilot in them. But also, I mentioned earlier, there is some stuff in Gundam, even in the hardline UC Sentry, They've got a couple of computer systems that have been developed to try and deal with new types who are, you don't know about Gundam, new types are people with psychic abilities that give them a piloting edge. They have like an ESP insight. They can communicate with each other. They can control weapons remotely and sometimes even manifest like physical psychic abilities. So that's a big problem for armies who don't have them. So they start coming up with computer systems to try and push their pilots to be able to perform at that level. And I think one of them is like the exam system is one, Jason, if I'm not mistaken. There's the exam system, which has a tendency to go crazy and take over. Like,
Yes.
yeah, and there's one instance where the pilot's just kind of like along for the ride inside their mobile suit going, stop. Unicorn does that. In Gundam Unicorn, the whole Psycho frame that's on the mobile suit kind of just takes over, and the pilot's sitting inside going, I don't want to do this. And Mecha's like, no, we're doing this. So transfer, but again, that would be a feature of whatever game you wanted to pick. Just pick a generic one. Let's see.
You know what my favorite anime is?
What's that?
No, I shouldn't say that. You know what my favorite Super Robo series is? Symbionic Titan.
That's not a bad
I could
show.
never get into it.
Oh, I got into it hard, man. Hard. I was so sad that it died because that show had so much potential.
Yeah, my older kids loved it. It just wasn't for me at the time that it was airing.
Remember Bionic 6?
Bionic 6.
And then Mighty Orbots. Remember Mighty Orbots from the 80s? That one was good. I liked Mighty Orbots.
Yeah, I hated the Bionic 6.
I don't know. It hit me because it was right at the time where I was into that kind of stuff. But the Mighty Orbots was cool because it was a really early attempt by an American company to do something Japanese-ish and not import something that existed already.
But I mean, come on. I couldn't get past the fact that they were like, what are we going to call them? Let's call them Mighty Robots. That's 2 on the nose. Okay, OR. They're now Orbots. Oh, that's perfect. Run with that.
Yep.
Like, just.
Well, that's marketing.
The name drove me nuts every time I heard it. It's like Tobor. Tobor is robot backwards. Yes, I know. I can read.
Yes, but you know what? They're marketing to like a 9-year-old in 1980s.
I was a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old when this shit was going on. Tobor's in the 70s. I was a 70s kid.
But Bear, though, you and I are not probably exemplars of
just
the
normal.
mass
We're not
market.
normal. Just not normal.
We're not we're not part of the mass market. Yeah.
I want to be part of the mass market.
It's easier to be part of the mass market.
I want a Macarena. I want to think outside the box. I want to make a run for the border.
So let's see.
That you would fix your player who doesn't want to role play or even know how. They wouldn't be at my table, I'll be honest with you. Anyone, I've had people who don't want to role play come to games, and after a session, I'm like, look, you clearly don't want to be doing this. Why are you here? Oh, just
Full Metal Dragon had mentioned this one. Everyday Heroes 5e offshoot has a really cool Pacific Rim source book.
And that was my answer.
I
enjoyed it.
I'll have to look into that one.
I haven't touched Everyday Heroes because the price point is just too damn high.
Yeah, let's see. Let's see if I missed any more of these. I know somebody had mentioned Lancer. Jason, you mentioned Lancer, and then Full Metal Dragon had commented this. Evidently, the publisher won't do a reprint. That's one of the biggest problems with the modern environment. I know that it's not easy to necessarily keep a book in print, but the idea that so much of gaming nowadays, even if not intentional, comes down to FOMO. Because there's a lot of games nowadays that if you don't get them while they're kickstarting them, you're never going to get them.
Yeah.
And now there are some companies who do that on purpose for the FOMO of it, and that's been proven. But there are a lot of them who just, that's their only way. What gets me is when you have giant corporations like Games Workshop who's still engaged in FOMO. I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you guys? You guys have the resources to sit there and produce constantly, but you're just gonna like, I'm sorry, you weren't one of the 200 who ordered this box set, and you can't get it anymore.
One of the caveats on POD though is Lulu is remarkably easy to set up print on demand for. I did it with Final Age, took me 5 minutes, and the product was available. I got my print copy, it looked great. Took those exact same files, went to Drive-Thru RPG, and was completely denied by their system because it didn't match their InDesign specifications and this and that and the other thing. And everybody I know who does POD on Drive-Thru is given horror stories about what that can be like. It's a real nightmare scenario. So I can understand why a lot of these guys are just like, fuck it, I'm not going to waste the time because I can't afford to hire someone at $20 a page to lay this book out for me for Drive-Thru RPGs specifics, you know?
Yeah. That's the other thing too, though. Is like, I think the existence of print on demand and the skyrocketing costs of production in general for a lot of people is like, when games were being produced by game companies who had some capital, even if they weren't giant and successful, they could afford conventional print runs, offset print runs. But with everybody and their grandma producing games nowadays, you might be able to afford offset print run, an offset. I don't know why that word is sticking. Print run, but you need that pre-order that you get with like a Kickstarter to know to have your money in line, because you're not going to want to print 600 copies and only sell 200. You can't eat that.
No, but I mean, at the same time, Worlds Without Number is a perfect example of that, where they have this beautiful offset printing that is, well, it's the same guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Worlds, the same guy. The offset printing is beautiful, and it's a miracle of printing. It's gorgeous. It's stitched well. They did a great job. The print-on-demand version from Drive-Thru, because the book is so big, falls apart.
Oh, yeah.
And people are complaining about it all the time. So, I don't know. I'm the guy that's making money off this, and I think to myself, gee, there's an awful lot of demand for this. So what I'll do is I'll set up a Kickstarter just for a reprint of the offset and see how many people want to buy it. And then I'll know how many I need to order. And if I get 500 or whatever my minimum from China is, I've got my offset print ready to go. And people can get the book without going to the secondary market, where people are charging almost up to $200 for used copies.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have no problem with that. You see that actually in board games a lot right now. My buddy who's a board gamer is like, all right, there was this big run of this really cool game. I wasn't able to get it. And then that company will come back and say, hey, there's a lot of demand. We're going to do a second run of this. I don't see that as like predatory.
No, I see that as responding to your customer base and your market demand.
Exactly. You know, that's bringing back the McRib, you know. I mean, although the McRib is kind of FOMO also, but at the same time, we know it'll be back every year, so there's no huge fear of missing out. But I really do get miffed at big companies. A couple things. I get mad at big companies who have the resources to do it on their own, but choose to kickstart anyways. Like, bigger companies, like, you've already sold $8 bazillion worth of this. Why are you running a Kickstarter to do this?
So I just want to address FMD.
Yep.
I'm not saying Drive-Thru RPGs, Lightning Press books fall apart. I'm saying specifically that one has a problem because it's this fucking thick. It's insanely big. And the binding style they use at Lightning Press for that book is not holding up, is what we're finding out from people who got the POD.
It's a byproduct of the print method, not the company doing it, because there are different kinds of bindings, because there are different kinds of books that require different kinds of bindings.
And once you get over 300 pages, the POD from Lightning Press is not good.
I always find it funny when somebody's like, I bought this zine and it's like stitch bound. I'm like, it's a zine. Staple that shit.
Ring bind it at Kinko's,
Yeah, it's like, but it's like they put all this time in it. I'm like, it's 24 pages. Why? I mean, it'll last forever for sure, but it's a zine. Like, how often are you going to be flipping through it, right? I don't know. Maybe you're going to flip through it a lot, but I always like zines.
Still disagree. You disagree that this book that people are reporting has a problem with? You disagree with them? Okay. Go over to the Drive-Thru comments and talk to them, man. I'm just telling you what I've read.
Yeah, I don't think you can disagree with people's experience. If people are clearly running into a problem with that. Now, whether or not it's...
Well, you got lucky on one book, man. Like, it's not, your experience is not automatically negate everybody else's experience, sir.
The excuse they gave me was that it happened during shipping. That's why my book fell apart. I was like, no, I don't think so.
This is like when you try to talk to people about problems in the gaming community. And they're like, well, I've never run into that. Okay, cool. You had a cool group.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, you know,
No, when I hear about sexism or racism in gaming, I'm always, or homophobia, I'm always like, well, that's never happened at my tables but I realized my tables are not the standard. You know,
Yeah.
I understand that.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's exactly the same thing, but it's the same kind of an argument, I guess. Is, you know, because it didn't really, like, all I have to do is talk to my wife and say, so how was it being a girl gamer in the 80s?
Yeah.
And then I'll find out. But, and you know, anyways, you know, neither here nor there.
Okay, FND, you're my hero, man. Congratulations. You got a bunch of books that didn't fall apart. This particular book is having a problem, and it's something people are talking about.
There are so many variables too, though. I mean, and if we're gonna, you know, we got 5 minutes. So, how do you treat your books?
Yes.
How much use do your books get? What is the environment you live in? Like, do you have a climate-controlled home that doesn't have any moisture, or are you carrying your books to your office in 90% humidity?
Yeah.
You know,
where do you live is going to have a huge impact on books.
Where do you live? How do you live? How do you treat your books? What do you do with your books? I know plenty of people.
Was it a good print run? Did you just get lucky and get on one where the printers were on their game that day versus the other days where they rushed shit out because they had deadlines to meet?
And let me just say, we're not. This isn't an attack against you.
No.
It's just a statement of your experience. Your mileage may vary.
Exactly.
And Bear's had different experiences, and there have been other people who've had different experiences, and so clearly there is the potential and the existence of a instance of a problem.
You know, it's a good comparison. The 5 ebooks when they first came out, mine never fell apart.
Yeah,
but I read nothing about them falling apart. You know, people were having tons of issues, right? So it's just going to be what happens when it happens.
Yeah, and case I mean, so funny because even just how, like I mentioned, how you treat your books. I know plenty of people who would consider themselves to treat their books wonderfully, and I'm like, how are you doing that to your book? You murderer, you horrible person. And they're like, it's fine. This is perfectly fine. I'm like, no, it really isn't. I would never do that to my book. But, and they, again, I'm not saying that's what he's doing, but,
No. It's just, again, it can literally come down to print run. There was a classic moment with WizKids Hero Clicks where the order was fulfilled on a day that was a national holiday in China. So, or the day after, and everybody showed up to work drunk, and they sent out 30 of the same figure in each box.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Was your book printed on a Friday? Yeah. Where everybody's like, I don't fucking care today. All right. So we are almost to the end here. I want to thank everybody who came out. I want to thank, first of all, Bear and Jason for coming on and talking. It was cool having you. Jason, welcome. I've been wanting to get you on screen and discussing. Finally, glad that we finally found a topic that
I just got to wake up early.
Oh, I know. And you got a lot going on. So there's no shade there at all. The list of folks who turned out today is a nice big one. GM Cody from the Hilt, which is Chris. And then we got, which is Logan, which is the G.I. Joe Gamer, RW Bishop, Mage's Musings, Full Metal Dragon, Daniel Kearney, who snuck in early on, and I never give him a shout out. I am such a horrible person. Hungar, Yo Geek, where we got ADHD taking my brain away.
Mage's Musings.
Yeah, Mage's Musings. How could I forget the Puppet Master? All right, but that is the folks who showed up in the chat. There were more than you here because we made it up to like 12 people. Whoever's hiding, you need to speak. No, you don't really have to, but I just appreciate you doing. Be known.
Peace.
All right, well, this has been a good stream. I enjoyed it. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their Sunday. Bear, Jason, you guys both have channels. The old Geekcast channels, Mage's Musing, From the Hilt, GM Cody. We're all just a bunch of nepotistic, self cross-promoting streamers anyway. So
Stick around after we end, Eli. I got something to tell you.
all right, later, folks. I'm going to call it here, and everybody make that freezy face because